Hi you guys, and welcome back. I thought I would make a video on 36 horsepower engines and what my findings are. I'm kind of new to them because most of the time we threw them away back in the old days. Now we're saving them because of nostalgia and everything. And a lot of people are wondering, how do you get more power out of them? So I'm going to go over basically what you can do to a stock engine. Then I'm going to go over a stage 1 Okrasa, stage 2 Okrasa, and stage 3 Okrasa. The stage 3 basically changes it to more of a Porsche engineering, and it becomes a lot more challenging. And there's a reason why they call it the 36 horsepower challenge, because it's a problem. There's definitely issues trying to get these things to get power. Let's start with the biggest problem of a 36 horsepower engine. The number one issue on these is the size of the intake ports. So if you look here, that intake port is tiny. And if you see here, these are the Okrasa heads, solves that problem. The second issue is the valves are just tiny, okay? And these have bigger valves. The other issue on these is the cams on them stock are just tiny, and there's basically no performance in these. There's definitely not enough duration. They're really pointy. Here's a stock one. If you look at that, and if you look here, this is a performance, what they call a B grind. And if you can see here, this one here is the Wolfsburg West Okrasa grind, which is quite a bit taller and definitely more duration even than the B grind. There's just a little bit more duration in this one, not really much more lift. Or in this one here, there's a little bit more duration, not much more lift, just a little bit. If you can see here, they took some off of here and they added over here, so that's how they get that extra duration in there. So and this one here, you could run ratio rockers to get your power, because basically the missing thing on most Volkswagen engines, even the 36 horsepower, is not enough duration on the cam. And the reason that is because they did not want you to put very many RPMs in these, because they basically engineered the oiling system marginally, especially on the 36 horse. So if you put too many RPMs into an old 36 without upgrading the oil pump, it's going to be a problem probably, and you're not going to have an engine that lasts. That's why they didn't put duration in the cams. So first things first, let's talk about a stock engine, what you can do to the stock engine to give it more power. And if you're doing a complete rebuild, I would start with like a B grind cam on the performance and maybe put some ratio rockers on it. I would also consider opening up the case like so for 80s or 81s. That would give you a little bit more cubic inch, which is going to give you more power, cubic centimeters, whatever. But again, your issue is going to be the heads. They are only going to let so much air and fuel go through them, and that is going to be the weakest link. So it's probably not going to give you very much more power. The other thing you can do is mill them down a little bit and go with a little bit higher compression ratio. These are 42 cc. You could probably go a little bit more than that and get it up to about 7.5 to 1. I think this is actually 7.2 or 7.5 with the 77s. So if you went to 80s, they give you a little bit more compression. So you could do that and even go a little bit smaller cc on these. But then you run into a whole bunch of other issues if you go too far. I'm not sure where the threshold of pain is because I've never done it. But so if you got a reground cam, what happens is you end up with a little bit. See how much tighter that is? Let me get you guys up close so you can see how much closer that is to the cast. And this one here is the not been reground cam, and how much closer that is. So that would enable you to tighten up the deck height a little bit, because now your push rod is going to be further in. Okay, so, or not tighten up the deck height, but tighten up the compression ratio a little bit, because your push rod is going to be a little bit further in. On the 36 horse, you don't have an adjustable cut to fit push rod. Either you're going to have to pull the ends off of these and make them, so that becomes, again, the challenge is going to be trying to, if you go too much compression ratio, you're going to run into issues trying to get the engine to go together. You know, your push rods are going to be too long, and the only thing you can do is shorten them. I've done this before on other engines by taking these off and cutting them a little bit and putting them back on. So you could probably do that in 36, but again, I have never done it, so I'm just letting you know that that's a challenge you're going to run into. So going too much compression ratio could be a much more difficult thing to do. Some guys I've heard go up to 9-to-1 to try and get more power out of it. One guy says, yeah, I go 9-to-1 and I can get 75 miles an hour out of my 36 horse. I'm gonna go, listen, I have a stock 36 right here in this Beetle, and it does 75 miles an hour on the freeway, and it goes down the road really nice. The only thing I've done to this is on the dual exhaust. I think the weakest link on these is on the dual exhaust car is that the baffles give you too much restriction, and I found I put straight pipes on mine. All I did was straight pipe these, and I was able to up the main I went one size up on the main jet, and that gave me a little bit more top end horsepower. And the best part about that is it did not really cost me any torque. So you could do that as well, or any number of these things. But I found that the biggest problem with the 36 is the heads. So you're going to run into a brick wall with that, okay? The heads, not enough flow to go through these things. The valves are too small. The head, again, that intake port is the main issue. You could try porting them a little bit. I did that to mine a little bit too. So I did a little bit of porting. It really, I honestly, maybe if I'm lucky, I gained a horsepower, 1 horsepower maybe. So it didn't really change anything at all. Nothing noticeable to most people, but I noticed it. I think it got a little bit more into the triangle valve job and a little bit of porting on them. Couldn't get much out of here, okay? Maybe half a millimeter, something like that. It wasn't much. And cleaned them up a little bit going in. I did that, and then cleaned up the exhaust. I think I opened up the exhaust quite a bit to try and get it to release the combustion better, which I don't think there's a real issue with that with these heads. It's mostly the intake port. Again, everything in this video is my opinion. These are experiences that I've had. I'm not an expert with 36s. I haven't done a ton of stuff with them, but I'm just kind of learning this stuff, so I'm just showing you what I'm learning at the same time while I'm learning it, because then it's fresh in my head. So let's go from the stock engine to the stage 1 Okrasa. Stage 1 Okrasa, and there's like kind of a 1.5, I'll tell you, in there too. So you can add a couple things. If you're doing a complete rebuild, maybe you'll do the 1.5 instead of just the 1. But here's the first thing you can do to one of these things is pull the engine out of the car, replace the heads with the Okrasa kit heads. The Okrasa kit, I'll put a link in the description, comes from Wolfsburg West. It has these heads, which are Autolinea heads, really well made, good quality aluminum, and they have dual ports, if you didn't notice. Dual port heads. Now this is not a real easy bolt-on thing, guys. It's kind of easy, but not that easy, okay? You got a little bit of machine, not machine work, but you're gonna have to put the linkage on the fan shroud, a lot of things like that. You're gonna have to do some of the modifications to the fan shroud. You're gonna have to cut your tin. See how that's cut right there? That's how the intake manifolds go in. To put the intake manifolds on the heads, just going to show you this in this video because a lot of people think, yeah, you just put it on real quick. It's not that easy. It has to be done like so. You put the intake manifold and the tin on together, okay? So yeah, the intake manifolds go on, and then you put the engine in the car. So it's a little bit more difficult to get the engine in the car. I don't know, we'll find that out later because I really don't know how hard it's going to be. But if you see here how tight it is, it's real tight to fit, and the intake manifold goes on with the tin, all in one piece on the head. This was an original thing they did in the 50s. Ampy was selling these kits. They had two different types of kits. They had the Okrasa kit, okay, which was basically the stage 1 that we're talking about right now, which is adding just these manifolds, these heads. There's carburetors that come with it, like so. And some people are saying that you may need to modify these carburetors eventually. Maybe the aluminum or kind of a aluminum substance is not the best like the original ones, and the shaft wears out. Usually that happens on the original carbs anyway, so they had that issue on those. So you may have to end up bushing these at some point, a couple of modifications later, but this really gives you the most bang for your buck. You can just buy this kit. It's less than $2,000 right now, and you could add this to your engine, and a lot of times the heads on the old 36s were wiped out anyway. The exhaust valves tend to drop into the seats. There's issues with those, okay? They had a lot of problems with them, so you might need new heads anyway when you take it apart, and this kind of solves two things. You could just add these to your current engine, or when you're doing your rebuild, you could add these heads and do a couple of other things, which I call a 1.5. It's stage 1.5, not really a 2. We're going to talk about the stage. This is still in the stage 1 category, which the stage 1 category is basically add the head kit to your engine without doing any other modifications. They say that the head kit alone can take you from 36 horse to around 52 or 54 horsepower. I forget what they said. 52 horsepower from 36 is huge. So that's a giant increase in power. So, and that's with just leaving this bottom end all original and stock. So that's, to me, a good modification for your buck. You spend less than $2,000, you do it yourself, add this thing on there, and you're going to get more power, and you're going to solve the main issue, which is the heads, and get bigger valves and all this stuff. So it's really a huge increase in power. Makes the engine run a lot better. Just make sure, if you do this, in all honesty, I would definitely take a look at your oil pump and see that it isn't the factory 17 millimeter. If you've got to take the cover off of it and pull the gear out and put a wrench on the gear, and if it's a 17 millimeter wrench, I would pull that out and put at least a 21 millimeter pump in it, because you're going to be running more RPMs. Running more RPMs on this engine, you're going to need more oil pressure. So I would definitely do that at the same time when you're doing this modification, if you're just going to add the heads. If you're doing a rebuild, X-nay the 17 anyway. I get rid of that thing. Either go to 21 or 26 if you're going to go full flow. That's what I'm doing. That's how I do it. Somebody else might do it different, but that's how I'm going to do it. So again, part of the stage 1 you could do if you're doing a complete rebuild would be to open it up for the 80. They have 80 millimeter from AA Performance, and they have 81 millimeter forged pistons from Wolfsburg West. Depends on how much money you want to spend. If you do the 80s instead of the 81s, see this ridge right here? When they open this up, they're going to deck this nice and smooth, and you're going to need to machine your cylinders to the edges of your cylinders. You'll see what I'm talking about when you get a new cylinder. They have like a heavy edge on them, and it's kind of oddly shaped. The 81s are just round like a regular old later model Volkswagen. They're shaped like this. The 81s are. You can see it's just basically round, right? The other ones have like a real kind of different shape. You'll know what I mean when you have them in your hands. I don't have some here to show you, so I can't help you there. But it's definitely something you're going to have to machine. You can just do it with a bench grinder or whatever, because it's nothing that's something that's like, you know, calculated machine. Okay, it's nothing like that. It's just basically the casting sticks out too far, and you're going to have to machine those to meet up with it. So there's a lot of little stuff like that on 36 horse engines. There's a lot of little tiny things like that that you're going to run into. You have to take your time when you build one. They're not just like building a 1600 where you just slap everything together. There's a lot of little things like that. So you're going to have to machine those cylinders down to fit. So you can put the 80s or the 81s. 80s are a little cheaper. Again, I've heard things like the taper on this. There's a little bit of a taper on the cylinders on the 81 or 80s, and the 81s are more straight. The cylinders, machine work is a little bit better. But I know a lot of guys running 80s, and they're not having any issues, even though their machine work isn't the greatest. It's not as good as the ones you get from Wolfsburg West for sure. But guys are running them, and they're having no issues. So just so you know that. So the other thing you can do at the same time is put the performance cam in here, which will help. And I don't think with just 80s that you're going to want to put the ratio rockers on there. I think it'll be, the cam might even be too much for this engine. I don't know. I've never done it that way. But the cam was designed for the stage 2, just so you know. So the stage, if you do the 1.5 and you put the cam in and it's over cammed a little bit, that might be something you want to handle. Now, the other issue you're going to run into when you put this thing together is you might end up wanting to deck the heads a little bit to get a more compression ratio when you do the 1.5. So the 1.5, you could also deck the heads a little bit, and that'll give you a more higher compression ratio, and that will help out maybe with the cam being big. Okay, and it's not big compared to 1600, but for this size of engine, it is. These cams, I think, are like 245 or 345 lift. That is not very big in the VW 1600 world. That would be kind of a cheater cam, a really small cheater cam at that. But in this little engine, apparently that is kind of big. So anyway, there's that problem. So the other thing you can do is, I think you could probably get one of these from Brothers Machine Shop. You'd have to call them and then special, or bring in your cam and take your cam in and have the cam grinder do a B grind on it. That would be a really nice, cheap way to do it. It's a little cheaper than going with this. This cam and gear sets, I think it's near $200, a little over maybe, just for that cam and gear. So if you go this direction, you can get one of these for less than $100, I'm pretty sure, and get the B grind. But with the B grind, you're going to want to run the ratio rockers. The ratio rockers are from AA Performance. So again, the 1.5, you can plan to play around with the cam and do a little bit bigger cam in it. If you're going to split your case, I would highly recommend upgrading the cam if you're going to do the whole engine build, rebuild. I would upgrade the cam if you're doing the whole engine build, and I would also upgrade the cylinders at that if you're not going to go to the stage 2. So that's a stage 1 and 1.5. So I'm building right now a stage 2. Okay, stage 2, Okrasa had the option. You could buy the kit with the crankshaft, and I think they also included the cam. I'm not sure with that kit if they did or not, but I know they had the cam option for the stage 2. So you could buy the heads by themselves. That was a stage 1 type of thing that they did back in the 50s. Again, this is all like a nostalgic thing. It's not like you're just adding pieces to your 36 that aren't period correct. These are like totally period correct, cool stuff. Okay. It's like doing a flathead, for your Ford, back in the 50s style, what guys did. So this is what this is. This is kind of a nostalgic upgrade from kits they made back then. This is a replicated kit made today to match the old ones. So, stage 2, a stroker crankshaft, 69.5. Here is the stroker crankshaft. It is counterweighted. It is chromoly 4340. It has 8 dowels. Now you run into issues. So if you do too much horsepower in your stock engine, the other thing I was going to recommend on your one at 1.5 is also get an 8 dowel. Get your flywheel 8 doweled. The stage 1, I would get this 8 doweled as well. And so if you're going to do like the 80s, if you're going to do just the basic stage 1 by just adding the pistons and cylinders, or I mean the heads, without doing the pistons and cylinders, you could do it without 8 doweling it. But if you're going to go with the bigger pistons and cylinders and the cam, it might be a good idea to 8 dowel this. DPR is a machine shop in California, Santa Ana. They do 8 dowel for these. They also do modifications to stock cranks, so you can even get a stock crank. They do them to. They do a couple different modifications to stock cranks. You'd have to talk to them, but I think they do counterweights. You can add counterweights to your stock crank. Have them do that, and you can add this. But then again, you know, the money starts going up as you do all this little stuff. Okay, guys. So the 8 dowel, you could do that on the stage 1.5. So stage 2, upgrade the crankshaft, and this is where I really like to go for me, is because I really like a counterweighted crankshaft. I think this was the big cheap thing that VWs did. Porsche all had counterweighted cranks. Volkswagen had the non-counterweighted, and the counterweighted crank spin better. The stress is taken by the counterweights instead of going through the whole crankshaft to the flywheel. So when you do the counterweighted crank, you have to do a couple of other things. In my opinion, this is the only way I would do it. I would not put the stock flywheel on this. Since you have the counterweights on your crankshaft, now I like to put a lightened flywheel on. Okay, a lightened flywheel with the stock counterweights, with the stock counterweights does not work well. Okay, and that's why you got to go out and have your other flywheel dowel pinned if you're going to go to the 1.5. Okay, and not put on one of these, because one of these it's going to shake. Your engine's going to shake a lot. It's not going to be, you're not going to like it. Okay, with this, with the counterweighted, the counterweights add more weight to the crankshaft, and you take away that weight by getting a lightened flywheel. So this is a Porsche 200 millimeter flywheel. Part of the stage 2 that I would do would be the 200 millimeter flywheel with a 200 millimeter clutch, and now you have 8 dowel here. See the 8 holes. Dowel pins go in those holes. They're very small, not like a regular 1600. And this is still a 6-volt gear, okay? And this is a 200 millimeter clutch. So you put a later model clutch, VW clutch in it. These are available at AA Performance. So now you run into another issue with the 69.5 that I'm just finding out now. I don't know, maybe we'll have some others, but I think this is pretty much going to be it. So if you see here, the rods clear the case pretty well. Just kind of get this thing around here. If you can see there, they clear the case pretty nicely. I mean, not a lot of space in there, but it's enough. But it's, you know, it's 1/8 of an inch away. Okay, so there's no issue with the case clearing. Doesn't look like, I don't see anything where they hit yet. Again, you know, if I haven't got the whole thing in here, rotated it, put the top on it yet, but I don't see anything else that's going to hit. But there is something. All right, so with the timing mark lined up, see if you guys can see. Make sure everybody knows that I am good. See the 2 marks? I got the 0 between them too. Hopefully you can get in there. I have to have my reading glasses on to see in here. It's kind of dark, but I think you guys can see that is lined up. Okay, with that lined up, rotate it around. with the stock rods. And let's see here, a little difficult to do with these, my hands holding a camera and holding them in position, because they have to be where they would be if they were touching the piston. And you can see right here that we run into an issue right here. You can see right there, rotating around, run into an issue right here. They clear. It looks like they hit just the bottom corner right there. You can see, look, that is not quite where it would be. It looks to me like she's going to hit. Now, I haven't tried this by putting the case together and putting the pistons in it yet, but it looks like that rod, the bottom corner, which I marked, is going to hit right there. The rest of it, I don't think it will, because it will go down. If I go past that a little bit, right, it's fine. It's still in the center, but it's at one point right there where it needs a little bit of clearancing. Just right on the edge of that rod, right there. So now you run into an issue where you can either clearance the rod yourself, or it might be a good idea to just buy the clearanced rod set. At AA Performance has a set. Brothers Machine Shop also has a lighter set. They have what the difference is, Brothers VW Machine Shop has ones that are, I don't know, they might be comparably priced, I'm not sure, retail, but they are supposed to be similar weight to the original rods. The AA Performance ones are definitely heavier than the stock rods. So a lighter bottom end is going to get you more horsepower. Just so you know, you get better top end out of it. But they're both H rods, so they're plenty strong. I think either one would be plenty strong. The AAs are a little bit heavier, might be a little bit cheaper, but I'm not sure. Depends on retail. So that's where your decision time comes. Are you going to go for the... Yes, I do have a little bit of play. Are you going to go for the clearancing these ones and take a chance? I mean, it looks like to me just that ear of the rod has to be clearanced right here. Just kind of taper that a little bit, and that would probably be okay without hurting the strength of the rod. But then again, they have to be clearanced, and then take and weigh them and make sure that they aren't above the, you know, the spec between them according to VW manual. I think I was looking at 4 grams between them. I think I can get them tighter than that, but anyway, that's what the Volkswagen manual said that I read. Maybe I'm wrong, I don't know. But anyway, the rods will need to be clearanced to clear the camshaft. Maybe if you used a B cam with these, it might work. Then again, we're running into stuff I don't know, but I'm just showing you so that you can kind of look into this stuff yourself and figure out what you want to do. So stage 2 was not, I didn't know this ahead of time. This is something I've had to find out. And you can see that sucker hits, man. It's hitting all the way as I go down to right there. Just the bottom ear hits that. So anyway, that's what I'm seeing with stock rods. That's why they make the other rods. So yeah, that's another issue with stage 2. You may just have to go out and buy the clearance rods. The other issue you can end up with stage 2 is you may need to lengthen the push rods. They give you, when you buy the crankshaft kit, Wolfsburg West gives you the spacers. Somewhere you put them in here, I don't know, either you take this end off or take that end off, and you put a spacer in there, and it's just a, you know, whatever, 60 thousandths or whatever, I don't know, 100,000 spacer, I don't know how thick it is. You put it in there and it lengthens the push rod. So you may need to use those if you just use shims. What I'm going to try to do, and I don't know if it's going to work or not, these are just things that you got to think about when you're doing this stage 2. If you're going to do it, I'm just telling you kind of have ahead of time what you might run into. Is I may end up step cutting the head and running a tighter deck height. It's a little bit tricky to do. It's something you got to know what you're doing when you do it. But what I'll do is I'll have the heads opened, because these need to be open for 80s or 81s. 81s might be different on the heads. I don't know. I'm going to find that out. I don't know. So when I take the cylinder down to have the heads done, I'll have them open these up for the 81s that I have, and then I'm going to have them step cut for the barrel thickness. So I'm going to have it. I'm going to have them say take off 10 thousandths bigger, and then step cut the head so that my piston is going to be almost at 0, and then my deck height will be in the combustion chamber. You just got to know what I'm talking about to know what I'm going to do there. So I'm going to try to fire more in the combustion chamber, which will give me better or more efficient fire. So normally your VW has a 60 thousandths deck height between the piston and the top of the cylinder, because they don't have head gaskets. And most normal cars have a head gasket that does that. The head gasket thickness keeps the piston away from the top dead center, because as that rod goes up, there's a little tiny bit of rod stretch possibly, and it'll hit the head. And if it hits the head, it's over. So the engine needs to be rebuilt or replaced, or rods might be bent, all kinds of stuff. So anyway, if I can do that by putting a step on here, a little step, and put more in the combustion chamber, then what may happen is I may not need to use the shims on these. And what's nice about the 36 is you put these in after the fact. I think you have to have the push rod tubes out to put them in. I'm not sure. Maybe they do fit through the push rod tubes. I've never tried that, but maybe they do. And slide them through the push rod tubes, or pull the heads off, slide these in after the fact. So might have to pull it apart a couple times to make sure that these are the right length, because on a regular VW performance engine stroker, you'll have to get cut to fit push rods. Okay, on a 36 they don't make them. Well, actually they do. In the stage 3, we're going to talk about that in a second. But they make a lifter that takes a standard push rod and goes in there. AA Performance makes them. So you could do that and use cut to foot push rods if you wanted to do that method. But the spacer comes with it from the Wolfsburg West kit. So if you just wanted to just go for the kit method, you could buy the 69.5 crank, and you want something that's going to be bolting on. You might want to get the rods, get the clearance rods, clearance H rods. I don't know why they make H, but whatever. They make H rods, so they're clearanced. That's what you're looking for. Clearance H rods, so you don't have to do it yourself. And then put the spacers in these, and then it'll be pretty much a bolt together 69.5. But again, guys, anytime you're doing any stroker engine, please do a mock-up. Do not just put it together and assume that everything's going to be fine. Do a mock-up, put it together, check it. Always. That's what I'm doing right now. Okay? So do a mock-up. That's what you need to do anytime you're doing stroker. Now, so that's the stage 2. The stage 2, you put in the cam, you do the crankshaft. Those are some of the issues you're going to run into. We may have more. I'm doing the full build on this, so you can come back for the full build video on this when I'm done, or just watch the stages as I do them. I'm just doing some videos on the stage building, and then what I do is when I get done with the whole thing, I'll take a bunch of the different footage and I'll add them all together and I'll make a full build video. That's what I do on most of my engine builds. So you can watch it, learn from it, kind of reference a few things. It doesn't mean that you're going to watch that and only use that to build your engine. You should be doing your own research. You should be reading your manual. There's a whole bunch of other things that should be done in addition to the engine build videos that I have. They're just to kind of help you see someone else do it. It really does help, guys, for the right people. So anyway, let's move to the stage 3, which is the 74. So to get the 74 in here, you can obviously see that if we have a 69.5 and we have clearancing issues, you can tell that if we add 2.5 millimeters to the stroke on each end, or let's see, we go from 69.5 to 74. That's that's only, what's that, 2.25 millimeters. So you add 2.25 millimeters to here. This might not clear the case. The counterweights might not clear the case. So you might have to do clearancing. I'm going to say you're probably going to have to do something. So that means you're going to have to mock it up with the rods. You have to put it together and rotate it. So you're going to have that issue for sure. You're going to hit something. There's going to be an issue. And you're going to be limited also on this cam size. So if you run if you run much bigger cam than this cam that's here, it's probably going to hit the rods, even the clearanced ones, and you might end up with some issues. I don't know what all the issues are because I'm not putting that one together. That's one of the reasons I didn't put that one together, because I didn't want to run into all those issues. Okay, I knew about some of them, but there's some of them that are going to surprise you, because you're going to have some that are just going to pop up. You know, you're going to be like, oh my God, I didn't know I had to do that. So the 74, you're probably going to have a little bit tighter clearance than this. So the rods are going to have to be clearanced. They're going to have to, definitely going to have to be the clearance rods for that. You're going to have to run into, so on the 74, you're going to run into the other issue, which is the piston skirts need to be shortened if you go with the 80s. If you go with the 81s, the Wolfsburg West 81 forged, the piston skirts are already shortened on those. So you're going to run into that issue because the piston skirt's going to hit the crankshaft, which tells me that you're probably going to have some clearancing issues inside here as well. So the other thing you're going to run into is, well, I think you have to go with the short rods. They have a 5 millimeter shorter rod at Wolfsburg West for the 74. So running the stock length rods, you'll have probably 200 thousandths to 250 thousandths of shims. So that's a 1/4 of an inch, guys. That's a 1/4 of an inch wider engine if you don't run the stock rods. I mean, you don't run the shortened rods. Now, I don't know what the rod ratio is on that, because they got a 74. Are these rods shorter than a Beetle, a regular 69 crank rod? I think they might be. So now you're getting into, you know, where's the rod ratio at? Is it, you know, an acceptable range? Which is probably going to be okay, but that's just something to think about. Then to get enough air and fuel in there, you're probably going to want to use the ratio rocker set. They have the 1.15 ratio rockers from AA Performance, so I looked into that. There are some other options, and I don't know what the results or how you could do it, and you'd have to really kind of dig into this one. The DPR makes a stroker crank too, and they use the stock crank to make it. I don't know if it's a 74 or not, or if it's a 69.5 or 69. I'm not sure which one it is. You'd have to contact them. But they have, what they do is offset grind it and use Chevy size rods. So when you get to Chevy rods, then again, I don't know all the issues you have, because the piston pin might be different size. I believe these are like one's 20 or one's 22. I don't know. Those are things that just to think about. I don't know what the issues are or the benefits. So there's that issue. You should, again, when you build one of these are, you know, anything you're doing 36 horse. Okay, like I got to put in right now, I got to put my oil pump in there. I'm going to make sure that it clears the bolts. Okay, so you might have issues there where either got to grind off the heads. These are grade 8 bolts I have on here, and I can grind off the heads real nice on these if I need to clear the oil pump. So because I'm going with a 26, you know, came with a 17, and the distance between here and the oil pump might be different. So there's a ton of little things to look at. It's one of those things when you get to the more complicated build, it's kind of like building the 2332. Nothing really that bad. Like a 2332, there's a lot more machining. You can just take the case in and have it machined to what it's supposed to be done, or buy the aluminum case, and that's fine. But you're going to need a cam that's clearanced for like the 2332s. That I'm just telling you that the comparison is kind of similar to that. But there's a lot of hand mock-up stuff you got to do. So some of the guys are like Brothers VW Machine Shop, when they build them, they actually deck the pistons. So they'll take some off the piston to make sure that you're going to have enough deck height. But even with the 69.5, I'm finding out that you really have to you're not going to have unless you have a giant shim. Unless I have 150,000 shim, I think it is 150,000, something like that. Yeah, 150,000 shim, I think, to get 60 deck height. Okay, you're gonna have to do things by using step cutting, or some guys might use head gaskets. No, they don't make head gaskets for this. You have to have them custom made. You know, even cylinder shims for these. You can get the ones from Wolfsburg West. They have them in 20 thousandths thickness, but if you're gonna put on that many, it's gonna cost you a darn fortune just to get the cylinder shims. So you might end up with things like this here, where the 1600 ones, I don't know, there's just try and find ones that work. You know, go down to the VW shop like Crankshaft. These ones here are a little loose, okay, and you know, these are 90 thousandths, and see if they can work. You know, it's all piece it together type of stuff. There isn't like some, see, what I was thinking about is these might hit the studs, and of course they do. So I'll have to notch them. If I use these, I'll have to notch these up. They're a little loose on the cylinder, which is fine. Okay, as long as they're still on this surface where I'm, you know, if they're still on this machine surface, that's okay. And I can notch the little corners out on them so that they go around the studs. And I don't know, these might be 40 horse. They were in a box that said 40 horse, so we don't really know what they were. But I got these at Crankshaft because they have a ton of different stuff, so I could just go through their boxes and find them. And I think that the 85.5s, you can get those, and they're a little bit too tight. I don't know why, but they're a little bit too tight. So if you grind out around here, you can grind this off and make them fit, So, getting cylinder shims that are that thick, even for the 69.5 are going to be an issue. And you're still going to have to shim it, because when I put the barrels on, I'm sticking out, I think it was 80 thousandths sticking out. So I'll have to have 120 thousandths to get it to a place where I feel comfortable, where I can put the rest of the deck height in the cylinder. So I'm going to use my cylinder for my deck height. I mean my head for my deck height. So that's what I'm going to do. Instead of using the cylinder for the deck height, I'm going to use some of the head for the deck height by using a step cut. So you gotta know your stuff when you're doing these, guys. You can't. This isn't an amateur type of thing where you're just going to buy the parts and put it together real quick. It's going to be something where you've got to, do your homework, and you're still going to find out, get some surprises if you go to 74. Even if you go to 69.5, there's still some issues. And the thing that I don't know, we'll have to find out later in the video series on this, is since I'm going to be 120 thousandths on each side wider, so that's almost a quarter of an inch wider engine, and you have to put the engine in the car with the intake manifolds on it, with both intake manifolds on it and the fan shroud and everything. Is it going to fit in the hole on the car? So because it's a tight, you're putting the engine in the car with the intake manifolds on it. You cannot put them on without it. If you can get the problem, how are you going to tighten that up with the intake manifold off the car? You can, and put them on in the car. You're not, because you're going to have the fan shroud right here, right? So you can't get to that bolt. You can't get it from this side. It's impossible to reach because the intake manifold is in the way. I'm just showing you. That's how it shows in the kit. How you put it on is you put the intake manifold and the tin on at the same time and put the engine in the car. So what issues are you going to run into? It's exciting, but it's different. It's not, it's people are doing it, so somebody else can do it. You can do it, but what the other more difficult thing to do is, like Shin from Hot VWs, he has the larger intake manifolds, and to put those on, I guess you have to put the intake manifolds on the car and then put the carbs on afterwards, and it's tight in there to do that. So, I don't know. I haven't done that before, so I can't tell you. But if you're going to go with they have I don't know, it's some other nostalgic kit thing they did with Webers back in the old days. You could put your Webers on it, and I don't know when that came out, but you could put your full size, 40s Webers on it, and yeah, then you got to Venturi those down. You got to take them on and off several times to get the jetting right on that. So it becomes fun. If you want to do it, it can be done. It's just these are the challenges you'll run into. So my concerns were the 74 was going to be possibly too wide, but if you buy the short rods, then it won't. Okay, it will actually come out narrower than the 69.5. So I'm finding that out after the fact. Probably would have been easier as far as that goes, fitting the engine in the car with the 74 and using the stock manifolds that were the ones that come in the kit. But the clearancing is going to be more with that. So it's just whatever direction you want to go, you can decide how you want to do it. It's not just a bolt-in thing. It's not just like you can buy all the parts and just put it together. It's not like doing, you guys, when I tell you guys, those 74 on a stock engine on a 1600, you adding a 74 crank in there is almost a bolt-in. I mean, it's really easy. This is not, okay? This has a lot more little facets that you're going to run into. A lot more little clearancing issues. They only make a zero gear for this. All right, so if zero isn't going to work for you and you need a different gear, you're going to have to take one off of the old thing and step drill, I don't know what that's called, a countersink the hole in here, and then thread the cam. I mean, or use the cam that they have and use the gear that you have with it. You've got to be able to do all those little things if you're going to do this, okay? You're not just going to be buying parts and putting it together. It's going to be more of a, you know, little bit of work. These rods was actually real easy, if you can see what I did to those, and then we balanced them. So I just had to do that right there, nothing, and that cleared it. And it was only on these two rods, because where those are in the back on the stroke, they don't hit. I don't know, but like I said, we balanced them all together within the spec of grams that they wanted. And then what else did we do? I just did them all the same, but just grinding that off did not change the weight significantly enough to even show up on the scale. So it was really kind of weird. It didn't do much. So just so you know. Anyway, it could be clearanced very easily, the stock rods for the 69.5 so far. But if you want to just buy the other ones, the H rods are kind of overkill. I mean, what do you need H rods on a little 36 horse motor? But that's because if they're going to make a rod, they make the heavier duty rods, because some people might be turboing one of these for the 36 horsepower challenge. And that's why they made those rods, the heavier duty ones. Because, you know, you're not going to be running something like this with turbo, okay? You're going to bend them. So the 74, I mean, if you want to do it, I'm just telling you, those are things you got to want to look into. I don't know all the details. I can't tell you all the stuff you're going to run into, because you're going to probably run into way more stuff than what you anticipate going to that engine size. So the 69.5 doesn't really have too many issues, in my opinion. There's the rod clearancing issue, okay? Going to the 74, you know, it really snowballs, because now you're going to have to go to the cut to fit push rods and the slide in lifters, because if your engine's wider, or if you start decking stuff and bringing down the, you know, the head decking the heads down quite a bit, and then step cutting them, and then, you know, running a really tight deck height, you know, running it to like say 5 or 10 thousandths deck height, and then doing because and the cylinder shims aren't cheap for these. They have them at Wolfsburg West for the 80s and 81s. And they only make them in 20s, so you have to buy, they're like, say about $25 a set. Then you got to buy 3 sets of them, 4 sets of them to get enough shim underneath the cylinder to get out far enough. And then you're going to have to deck here, down, to try and, you know, and to get the engine to be less wide, and then try and step cut it here to try and get to run a real tight deck height, just keep the engine from getting too wide so you can get it in the car. I don't know, use your imagination. Whatever you figure you're going to run into, just times that times about 5 or so, because you're going to run into way more issues than you think. So just so you know, that's the issues with going to 74. All right, I just wanted to kind of make a video to show you that it's not it certainly isn't a engine that you're just going to pop in the car, you know, real quick, you know, and you might end up having to assemble it in the car, you know, especially when you go to the bigger dual carbs and stuff like that. Not my forte. I like easy stuff to work on. I like stuff I can pull the engine in it. If it takes me an hour to pull the engine, that's no big deal. But if it takes me half a day or a day to do it, no, no thank you. I'm not going to do that. So anyway, because yeah, if I drive the car and the tranny finds, I don't like the way the tranny's shifting, so I'm going to pull the tranny. Oh, no, that's going to take me like a week's worth of time. No thanks. So anyway, that's the type of thing you run into on the 74. I just wanted to let you guys know about some of those stages. And again, you can add stuff, do more to it than that. There's all these options of things you can do to them, to even more than that. You know, it just becomes, but everything you do, it's very, very expensive. All the parts are really expensive. You know, it can be a pretty expensive deal to go to the 74 and try and get decent performance out of it. So anyway, I think I can get enough out of a 69.5 to be fun, and that's all I'm looking for. So anyway, I'll talk to you guys in the next video. And please like, share, and subscribe, and see your comments.